there's a lot of like trade candidates on the Chicago Blackhawks that if you want to do a little pre-scout to see, how these players look, play, if you think they would be, there's just a lot of intriguing names here. Like I'm thinking Max Domi is a guy who I think would be an intriguing name for the Maple Leafs. Sam Lafferty's a name that we've heard a lot. More of a depth player, but certainly a name that potentially, if they want to add some depth to the fourth line, he could be a guy. Defensively, you've got Connor Murphy, Jake McCabe. We've heard both of those names come up. McCabe a little more so of late than Murphy. And then obviously Patrick Kane is the big name out there. And I don't know if you heard Carlo Koliakovo's report. It wasn't a report. I will stop. I'm not going to call it a report, but he did say on First Up today that he was told by a source that Kane, if he wasn't going to go to New York, then Toronto was the next team on his list, pretty much, of teams that he'd be willing to go to. So maybe you want to keep an eye out on and see what Patrick Kane's doing. I know he's coming back from that injury. Is he as explosive, or is there a little bit of Foligno stench with this guy? There is a lot of concern over that hip with Patrick Kane and whether or not he'll be able to remain healthy the rest of the way. He came out and he did a little media tour the other day saying, "No, I'm good. I feel better than ever." The medicals kind of say something different, and the numbers you're putting up this year, Patty, say something a little bit different. So getting an up-close view of him tonight against Toronto, definitely something I'll be keeping an eye on.
You brought up what Carlo obviously said. I did see that floating around on Twitter there. There was also a gentleman who writes for NBC Sports Chicago, Charlie. I'm going to butcher this name completely.
Oh, I know exactly. I butchered it on air the other day on Leafs Lunch.
It seems Greek.
Honestly, I said I butchered it, and then I said Charlie from Chicago says.
This Charlie guy from Chicago. It's kind of got that feel to it, but
Charlie from Chicago.
So he actually when he did a piece on 7 trade deadline options for the Blackhawks and Patrick Kane, and when he was talking about Chicago, the Maple Leafs are a team I believe Kane would seriously entertain. They check so many boxes: legitimate Stanley Cup contender. Well, I mean, depending on who you ask, an original 6 market. He loves the
big. They are, Dave. They are legitimate contenders. Come on now.
I think they're legitimate contenders, but the comment section in our podcast don't seem to suggest that.
Good point.
This was an interesting one. Close to his hometown, Buffalo, which would be an easy commute for his family. His dad doesn't like to fly, so they drive to and from Buffalo for Chicago home games. And obviously the big point here is a chance to play with Auston Matthews, who Kane is itching to play with, and obviously was one of Matthews' favorite players growing up.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to like about that deal. If Patrick Kane is healthy, that is the question. And we don't know. But again, they went down that path with Nick Foligno before, where they rolled the dice on a guy who was injured, and it didn't work out in their favor. Does Kyle Dubas double down and do the same thing here? I don't know. What would it take to do that? I asked Darren Dreger today on my show on Leafs Lunch, could you see a scenario where basically he demands a trade to Toronto and they just take whatever Toronto's willing to give them just as a solid to Patrick Kane, because that's where he wants to go. And not to say that they're going to fleece him and give him a 7th round pick or anything like that, but could he be had for a 2nd rounder and a prospect, or I don't know if it would take something ridiculous, kind of similar to the Taylor Hall trade a couple of years ago.
I was better Hall, Claude Giroux,
yeah,
and in some ways Tarasenko's deal. Some people thought the Blues didn't get much back, and the reason why. Tarasenko had a no trade clause.
Yeah,
he only really wanted to go to certain places, and I think that's the same thing with Patrick Kane. If you're trading Patrick Kane, I don't understand that if you're Chicago, you want to get a ransom back for Patrick Kane, but this is also not the Patrick Kane that scored 92 points last year.
I just don't know. Like, they're gonna have to weigh it out. I don't know how many teams would be willing to give up top tier assets for a guy who they're not even sold will be able to last the end of the season. Like, there's some serious gripe on that hip. So they're gonna have to dig into the medicals and see if there's legitimate concern there or if it's being drummed up a little bit by media, like Patrick Kane said. But what is he gonna say, right? Like, obviously, he's gonna try and promote himself as being healthy. Like, he's not gonna come out and say, "Yeah, no, I'm pretty banged up, so buyer beware." Like, he's not gonna say that, right? But I think it is notable and it is interesting that it sounds as though he has interest in the Leafs. The question is, do the Leafs have interest in Patrick Kane, and at what price would they have interest in Patrick Kane? Like, if they could get him for dirt cheap, I'm sure they would. But what price does Chicago want? And what price would Chicago take as a minimum? I think that's kind of where this whole conversation is going to end up at some point.
Especially with the salary retention that will be needed. And I expect
double
contract or two.
Probably double retention, right? So you're going to have to pay another team some sort of asset to take another $2.5 million off the books.
Especially because there's not many teams that are going to be willing to do that.
No, there's not. That said, it's not actually $2.5 million. It's only, I don't know, 25% of what that would be, just based on how much cash is actually owed. And there could have even been signing bonuses, so who knows what the actual money is, but it's less than $2.5 million.
So daily cap hit right now is $3.25 million. Is what he is owed. The remaining, he had a $4 million signing bonus this year, so
he has 3.25 remaining on his cap.
Yeah.
Well, how much is remaining on his salary?
His base salary was 2.9. His total salary was 6.9. $4 million that was paid out in a signing bonus. So
right. So it'd be like 2.9 divided by, it'd be like 25% of that, right? So it's not as much money as it seems like it would be, right? So maybe it's not going to take a whole lot to find a second team to take that on for, a couple $100,000. Are you willing to buy a 4th round pick? Maybe there is a team out there who wants to get some draft picks and can afford to do that. Maybe a 3rd round pick or a B-level prospect or something like that. Who knows? Kyle's gonna have to get creative though, because that's not the only ad. Because if he gets hurt, now you're screwed. So that's a luxury ad for me. You got to go out there and do something else additionally. And if you're doing that, then like maybe you can do something on the back end by bringing him in. I don't know, but we'll see. I didn't plan on having a Patrick Kane conversation today, but here we are. We had the Patrick Kane conversation, and we'll see where it ends. There's less than 3 weeks to the deadline. 2 weeks this Friday. Lots of conversations going to be had between now and then. We'll see how much Patty Kane dominates those conversations. All right, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. And make sure that you are subscribed to us both wherever you get your podcasts and also on YouTube as well. We'd love for you to leave a comment down below. Anything you got to gripe about what we said today? Any gripes that y'all have? Are you interested in Patrick Kane potentially becoming a Maple Leaf? What will the price have to be? Let us know in the comment section below. That'd be awesome.